In the final turbulent years of China's Han Dynasty, the land fractured. Warlords carved out their own domains from the crumbling empire, and the people suffered under the weight of ambition and endless war. From this chaos, one man rose above all others: Cao Cao. A brilliant strategist, a cunning politician, and a ruthless warrior, he had consolidated his power in the north, controlling the emperor and commanding the most powerful army in the land. By the year 208, his gaze turned south to the fertile lands of Jing province and the wealthy territories beyond the great Yangtze River. His goal was nothing less than the total unification of China under his iron fist. He declared his grand southern campaign, assembling a force of such staggering size that chronicles claimed it numbered 800,000 men. It was an armada on land and water, a seemingly unstoppable tide of steel and fury, poised to sweep away all who dared to resist. His primary targets were two thorns in his side. The first was Liu Bei, a virtuous but wandering warlord, a distant relative of the Han royalty who was beloved by the common people, but commanded only a small, beleaguered force. The second, and more formidable, was Quan, the young master of the southern lands known as Wu. He was barely in his 20s, having inherited his domain from his brother, but he was surrounded by capable advisors and generals. As Cao Cao's legion descended, Liu Bei was forced into a desperate flight south. His small army and a great following of loyal civilians harried at every step. His chief strategist, the legendary Zhuge Liang, a man of profound intellect and seemingly supernatural foresight, knew that their only hope for survival was an alliance with Quan. Zhuge Liang traveled to Quan's court at Shaisang. There he faced a court divided. Many of Quan's advisors, intimidated by the sheer scale of Cao Cao's army, urged for surrender. They argued that resistance was suicide. But Zhuge Liang, with his sharp tongue and unwavering confidence, argued passionately for defiance. He masterfully analyzed the weaknesses in Cao Cao's seemingly invincible force. His soldiers were from the north, unaccustomed to the southern climate and naval warfare. They were exhausted from a long march, and their massive numbers were an exaggeration. He appealed to Quan's pride and his duty to his people. His arguments, combined with the impassioned support of Quan's own chief commander, Zhou Yu, swayed the young lord. The decision was made. The South would not bow. They would fight. The allied forces of Liu Bei and Quan gathered at a strategic location on the Yangtze River known as Red Cliffs. Even combined, their army was a mere fraction of Cao Cao's, perhaps 50,000 men against a force at least 4 times their size. Cao Cao, arrogant in his strength, had his massive fleet of warships chained together, stem to stern. His reasoning was to reduce seasickness for his northern troops, who were unused to life on the water. It would prove to be a catastrophic mistake. The Allied commanders, Zhou Yu and Zhuge Liang, knew they could not win a conventional battle. They needed a plan that relied on cunning, not numbers. Their strategy was audacious and deadly: fire. One of Quan's generals, Huang Gai, pretended to defect to Cao Cao's side. He sent a letter promising to bring his squadron of ships over to surrender. Cao Cao, blinded by his own arrogance, fell for the ruse. On the appointed night, the winds turned in the Allies' favor. A strong southeastern breeze began to blow directly towards Cao Cao's anchored fleet. Huang Gai's surrender ships sailed forth. But they were not filled with soldiers. They were filled with dry reeds, firewood, and oil. They were fire ships. As they approached the center of Cao Cao's massive interlocked fleet, the crews lit the vessels and escaped in small boats. The wind fanned the flames, turning the ships into unstoppable floating infernos. They crashed into Cao Cao's chained armada. The effect was instantaneous and apocalyptic. Flames leaped from one vessel to the next, engulfing the entire fleet in a maelstrom of fire and smoke. The chains that were meant to provide stability now ensured there was no escape. Panic and chaos erupted. Trapped on the burning ships or forced into the cold river, Cao Cao's army was decimated. The fire spread to his camps on the shore, completing the rout. Cao Cao himself barely escaped with his life, fleeing back north with a shattered remnant of his grand army. The Battle of Red Cliffs was over. It was one of the most decisive battles in Chinese history. A single night of fire and strategy had shattered Cao Cao's dream of swift unification. It secured the survival of Liu Bei and Sun Quan, allowing them to solidify their respective domains. This pivotal moment ended the period of reunification and directly ushered in the legendary era of the Three Kingdoms, where the rival states of Wei, Shu, and Wu would vie for supremacy for the next 60 years. The course of an empire was changed, not by overwhelming numbers, but by strategy, courage, and the changing of the wind. Subscribe